Hello, this video is about Schillinger Strata Harmony, a technique that yields dense multipart settings in parallel layers. The tutorial focuses on a specific aspect, the creation of independent parts when doubling a chordal function from an existing multipart layer. Voice leading must avoid parallel octaves, and that is achieved through carefully applying transformations. In this episode you'll see examples in the three Schillinger harmony systems. Recently I did a long tutorial demonstrating the strata harmony technique from the Schillinger system of musical composition. There you saw an orchestral example with dense setting, that is, parallel chord structure layers with multiple parts. When using doubled chordal functions, we should aim for independent parts through careful voice leading, simple octave transposition, and thus obtaining a set of parallel octaves in the doubled part is called coupling. I'll demonstrate the creation of independent parts in all systems of harmony. We'll briefly return to the earlier tutorial about Schillinger Strata Harmony. The second volume in the two-book series on his system of musical composition presents the general theory of harmony. An element of that theory is the technique of strata harmony, and in this video I'll consider the aspect of voice leading, for which you see the page references. Strata harmony means that we are writing chord progressions, continuities, in a number of simultaneous layers or strata, that each contain a single or multiple parts. The continuity implies positioning of each chord and transformations between successive structures. This is the voice leading domain. In strata harmony we may obtain dense orchestral textures. In this episode, the focus is on how to achieve independent parts when doubling a chordal function from an existing to a new layer. We'll try and avoid parallel octaves through appropriate transformations and create new layers from a limited initial set of parts. I'll discuss many examples, but we start with strata harmony derived from a given two-part interval continuity. That is the layer L2 in this diagram. That will return in 5 different strata harmony settings. You'll learn all derivative part options for this case. First, observe what happens when we simply double a part at the higher octave. The lower staff in the score shows the given interval series. Audio rendering of all progressions is done as sustained chords for orchestral sample libraries. Some of these will then be turned into instrumental form examples. The interval series has a tension curve through selection of consonant and dissonant intervals, with maximum tension in the second half before returning to consonants. Now we double the lower part by transposition into the next higher octave. The parallel octaves imply that we do not have an independent new part. This is called coupling. The combination of the two layers with a total of 3 parts becomes Now you'll learn how to create an independent added part from the existing layer. Look at the upper staff in the score and note that the lead is alternating between the parts from the lower layer. Thus we avoid parallel octaves. The price we pay is that there is an occasional diminished fifth leap in that part. It is the simplest form of an independent new part in this 2-layer 3-part combination. The same mechanism yields a second option, that is shown here in the lower staff. The bass also alternates between parts from the given interval layer, preventing parallel octaves. The consequence is a single diminished fifth leap in the bass. Listen to this combination. The obvious next thing is to combine the two newly created parts with the original layer, shown in the diagram as a 3-layer strata harmony setting. Both outer parts alternate between notes from the middle layer and can be labeled as independent, since there are no parallel octaves. In fact, this is the limiting case, since all options for an initial 2-part layer have been exhausted. Listen to the 4-part combination. This sustained chord progression is now turned into the first instrumental form example, a simple setting for chamber group. You'll easily recognize the 3 lower parts. The lead flute part has embellishments in order to create musical interest. The final strata harmony example obtained from the interval series has the 2 derivative independent parts in the top layer. Note the wide ascending leaps in the lead. This is caused by the requirement that the 2 layers must not cross. I've marked the cases where the lower part in the upper layer overlaps with the upper part in the lower layer. We do find diminished fifth leaps and a case of crossing voices within this top layer. Now listen to the other 4-part limiting case solution. The next 2 examples are in the Schillinger Diatonic-Symmetric harmony system. Chordal functions are distributed over 2-part layers and will introduce doubling and coupling. The diagram shows the 2 doublings, but first have a look at the chord progression. These are triads, with roots taken from the C Mixolydian scale. The chord types are an independent series of major, minor, augmented and diminished triads. The combination of triad types and positive and negative diatonic root cycles determines the tension pattern of the original setting. There is one case of a Riemannian transformation chromatic median pair at the end, and a few suboptimal voice leading leaps in this 3-part setting. The first doubling is copying the chordal function 3 into the upper layer. Independent transformations yield a new lead part that has no parallel octaves. The second doubling involves the chord root that is copied into the new bass part. It alternates through parts from the adjacent layer. The combination is a 3-layer, 5-part strata harmony with 2 doublings, a rich sounding setting for woodwinds and strings. In contrast, now I'll show the combination of doublings and the coupling. The coupling is added in the lower layer by writing exact parallel fifths below the existing bass part. This has consequences for the quality and the root of the original harmony. The result is a 3-layer 6-part setting, of which 5 are independent. The sound has become considerably darker. This sustained progression is turned into a somewhat more intricate instrumental form example for studio orchestra. The time signature is 3/4, the mood is mysterious, full of suspense. We proceed with 3 examples in the Schillinger symmetrical harmony system. This implies that sets of roots are obtained through equal division of the octave. In the examples, I'll use constant chord structures. Now, some layers will consist of 3 parts, which increases the independent transformation potential significantly. We start with the 2-root system with roots at the tritone interval, here C and F sharp. The constant chord structure is an altered dominant 7th chord, with chordal functions distributed over the 2 layers. The essential dominant chordal functions 1, 3 and flat 7 are in the lower layer and undergo clockwise circular permutation transformations. The altered function sharp 5 is in the top layer. The first double function is the root, copied to the upper layer and moving through the parts. Listen first to the independence between horn and contrabass. Then to the combination of clarinet and violas. Here is the total 5-part strata harmony with whole tone flavor and floating quality. Next, you'll see an example of a single doubling in the 4-root symmetric system. This consists of 2 3-part layers with considerable increased independent transformation potential. The 4 roots lie a minor third apart. The lower layer has the same 3 chordal functions as the previous example, but this time the transformation is different, namely a counterclockwise transformation. With 3-part layers, it is easier to prevent parallel octaves, as the doubled chordal function 3 cycles through the upper layer parts. In the upper layer, notice the 2 extended chordal functions 9 and sharp 11, plus the doubling of the 3. Listen to these chord structures for woodwinds and horn. The 2-layer 6-part combination has impressionistic flavor, still using a single whole tone scale. The previous example is modified by adding a new top layer with a doubling and a coupling. The diagram shows the structure of this 3-layer strata harmony. The new upper layer is a case of lacking independence. The lower part is a doubling of the adjacent layer lead part alternating between chordal functions 3 and sharp 11. The coupling is an octave plus major third above that note and yields exact parallel intervals. Listen to the violins. Next, listen to the 5-part combination of the two upper strata. And finally, here is the complete 8-part strata harmony, playing the full whole tone scale at any time. There is overall opening contrary motion. It's time for another instrumental form example, this time for 10 solo string players, using various playing techniques such as harmonics, pizzicato versus arco, and sul ponticello bowing, and ending with 3 forceful successive down bows. I've marked the original chords in the score. For the next example, we return to the Diatonic-Symmetric harmony system. The roots are from the diatonic scale C Phrygian, on top of which we put an independent chord structure series. We'll look at multiple doublings in 2 3-part layers with extended chords. The diagram shows the strata harmony scheme, with lower chordal functions at the bottom and the extensions in the top layer. Here's the series of minor, augmented and major triads in the bottom layer, and the progression with both positive and negative diatonic root cycles. This continuity yields another chromatic median pair, and this layer voice leading is based on circular permutation transformations in both directions. Strings play a number of open position voicings. The first doubling is the chordal function 3, moving through the upper layer parts. Listen to the independence between horn and violas that do share 2 overlapping pitches. A similar pattern is observed for the second doubling, chordal function 5. Listen to clarinet and cellos. The upper layer has the 2 doublings and the extended chordal function 9. These form incomplete 7th chords, with occasional voice-leading diminished 5th leaps. In the full strata harmony setting with 2 layers and 6 parts, there is frequent contrary motion between outer parts. The open and romantic mood is transformed into this instrumental form example, a relaxed bossa phrase for studio orchestra. Let's conclude with two strata harmony examples in the diatonic harmony system. Now both roots and chord structures originate from the same 7-pitch diatonic scale, here A major. The three layers yield fairly dense settings. When applying the same doubling approach to an initial 4-part layer, the number of options for obtaining independent transformations increases even further. These examples use 3 doublings, and the diagram shows that the chordal function is used threefold, occurring in each layer. The chord progression shows basic diatonic triads in the middle layer, again using a mix of root cycles. Observe that there is also a mix of transformations, which leads to the strings playing mainly closed position triads. There are 2 doublings in the lower layer, root and fifth. Listen to violin and contrabass that both start on chordal function 1. Chordal function 5 is also doubled to the upper layer. The triple occurrence happens in independent parts, although one parallel octave slipped through quality control. Listen to this doubling. In the upper layer we find chordal functions 5 and 9, yielding mostly intervals of the 4th and 5th. Occasionally I picked a non-diatonic 9th, in order to prevent highly dissonant minor 9th intervals with the lower layers. The woodwind sound here reminds of the opening of Ravel's L'Enfant et les Sortilèges. Here is the combination of the 3-layer 7-part Diatonic Strata Harmony, a dense setting with wide compass. We modify the previous example by adding a coupling. The diagram shows this coupling to the existing lead part. The score shows the parallel major third above the original lead part. Listen to woodwinds and glockenspiel performing this coupling. The coupling adds a number of non-diatonic pitches, plus the occasional major 7th span in this layer. Here is the 3-part upper layer. The mood of this continuity has changed considerably. The wide range and dense 8-part 3-layer setting definitely sounds less diatonic and would require careful orchestration when developing into an instrumental form. We've reached the end of this tutorial on voice leading in Schillinger Strata Harmony, where we created new multipart layers through the process of doubling and coupling. In order to obtain independent new parts, we use a voice leading approach that prevents parallel octaves. This is achieved through independent transformations in the individual layers. The number of transformation options is proportional to the number of parts in the layer. A number of examples in the various systems of harmony has shown this process in sufficient detail. Please subscribe to this channel where I share free tutorials on music composition. Funding will not guarantee error-free episodes, but I do welcome donations in support of video production. You'll find the PayPal link in the description. Visit the website for more content or purchasing ebooks from the webshop. Until next time, thanks for watching.